The snow fell so thick that Maple Ridge disappeared beneath it. Ethan Walker sat in his idling pickup truck, staring at the house through the windshield wiper's rhythmic sweep. The porch light was out. Ice clung to the gutters. Behind him, in the back seat, his son Cameron slept with his cheek pressed against a stuffed bear, breath fogging the window. Ethan cut the engine. The silence pressed in, immediately different from the desert silence, which always held a threat. This was just cold. Just empty. He'd been home from Afghanistan for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of sleeping on his brother's couch in Portland, of filling out job applications at coffee shops, of watching Cameron draw pictures at the library while Ethan tried to figure out what came next. The divorce papers had arrived the day before his second deployment ended. His ex-wife, Sarah, had already remarried a dentist in Seattle with a stable income and a house that didn't smell like old regret. Ethan had no plan, no backup, just the settlement from selling their old place. Barely enough for first and last month's rent on this weather-beaten rental in a town he'd never heard of until the listing appeared in his search. He stepped out into ankle-deep snow. The cold bit through his jacket. Cameron stirred but didn't wake as Ethan lifted him out, bear and all, and carried him toward the front door. The key stuck in the frozen lock. Ethan had to lean his shoulder into the door to force it open. Inside, the house exhaled cold air. The heat was off, the pipes probably frozen. He laid Cameron on the couch, still bundled in his coat, and went to check the thermostat. 62 degrees. Better than outside, but not by much. He found blankets in the bedroom closet, musty but thick, and covered his son. Cameron's face in sleep looked exactly like Sarah's. The same slope of nose, the same curve of lips. Ethan stood there in the dark, watching his breath turn to mist, and felt the weight of every decision that had led here. 2 deployments, a marriage dissolved over satellite phone calls and long silences, a 5-year-old boy who sometimes flinched when doors closed too loud. Outside, through the frost-etched window, Ethan saw a light come on across the street. A porch light. Then the front door opened and a woman stepped out. She wore a thick sweater and boots, her breath visible in the cold air. She looked at his truck, at the dark house, then crossed the street carrying something. Ethan met her at the door before she could knock. "Sorry," she said. Her voice was quiet, careful not to wake anyone. "I saw you pull in. I'm Lena. I live across the street." She held out a glass dish covered in foil. "It's lasagna, still hot." Up close, she had dark hair pulled back, lines at the corners of her eyes that suggested she smiled often but wasn't smiling now. Just watching him with a directness that felt neither intrusive nor cold. "Ethan," he managed. She nodded like she'd already known. "I figured you wouldn't have groceries yet. There's also bread and milk in the bag." She indicated a canvas tote at her feet. He took the dish. It was warm in his hands, and he realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for him. "Thank you." She turned to go, then paused on the porch step. Snow caught in her hair. "Listen," she said, and there was something in her voice, not pity, not charity, but something firmer, recognition, maybe. "You don't have to do this alone." Ethan stood in the doorway, holding a stranger's lasagna, watching her walk back across the snow-covered street to her warm house. The light from her windows spilled yellow across the white. For the first time since he'd come home, the tightness in his chest loosened slightly. Just slightly. Just enough to breathe. The pipes were frozen. Ethan discovered this the next morning when Cameron asked for water and nothing came out of the faucet. He spent 2 hours with a hairdryer borrowed from the landlord's maintenance kit, thawing the copper pipes in the crawl space while his son ate cereal with the last of Lena's milk. By noon, water flowed again. Small victory. He took it. That afternoon, they walked into town. Maple Ridge was the kind of place that appeared on those lists of small towns worth visiting: a main street with a diner, a hardware store, a library with Christmas lights still strung in the windows even though it was mid-January. The snow had been plowed into high banks on either side of the street. Cameron held Ethan's hand and pointed at everything. "Can we go there?" "Later." "What about there?" "We'll see." The diner was called the Lakeside, even though the lake was frozen and hidden behind trees. Ethan ordered coffee and eggs. Cameron got pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, which the waitress name tag reading Ruth brought out without being asked. "New in town?" Ruth asked, refilling Ethan's cup. "Just moved in. Thought so." "You're in the old Barrett place." She smiled. "Lena mentioned you." Of course she had. "She's good people," Ruth continued, wiping down the counter. "Runs the bookkeeping for half the businesses in town. Quiet, but reliable. You picked a good street." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. Over the next few days, a routine emerged. Ethan painted Cameron's bedroom sky blue. His son insisted while Cameron helped by sitting on the floor with a coloring book. They walked to the library every morning. The hardware store every other day for supplies Ethan hadn't known he needed. Caulk, weather stripping, a better snow shovel. And every morning, around 7, there was a knock on the door. Lena with coffee. 2 cups, already fixed his black, she'd somehow guessed. She never stayed long, just handed them over, asked if they needed anything, and left. On the 4th day, Ethan asked, "Why are you doing this?" She paused on his porch, snow beginning to fall again. "Because when I first moved here, someone did it for me, and because I know what it's like to start over somewhere cold." She didn't elaborate. He didn't push. That night, after Cameron was asleep, Ethan stood at the kitchen window and looked across the street. Lena's house was a small Cape Cod, white with dark blue shutters. Every window glowed. He could see her moving past the kitchen window, just a shadow, just a shape, but there was something steadying about it. He'd lived in forward operating bases where you learned everyone's patterns. Where you wake up, where you eat, where you go when the mortars hit. Survival was knowing the map. This felt similar, except no one was trying to kill him, just trying to live. The farmers' market ran every Saturday in the community center parking lot, even in winter. Lena mentioned it casually during one of her coffee deliveries, and Ethan decided to go. Cameron needed to see other kids. Ethan needed to see something other than the inside of their rental. They walked. The snow crunched underfoot. Cameron's breath came in little clouds that he tried to catch with his mittens. The market was smaller than Ethan expected, maybe a dozen vendors selling root vegetables, preserves, firewood, handmade soap. But it was warm with bodies and conversation. Someone was playing guitar badly in the corner. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon mixed with the cold air. "Ethan," he turned. Lena stood by a table of winter squash, holding a canvas bag. She wore a green scarf that made her eyes look darker. "Hey," he said. Cameron ran to her like she was a long-lost friend, showing her a wooden toy he'd been carrying. She knelt down to his level, listening seriously as he explained its entire imagined history. Ethan watched them. Watched the way she didn't talk down to Cameron. Didn't ruffle his hair or pinch his cheek like so many adults did. Just listened, just saw him. When she stood, she looked at Ethan. "You hungry?" "Always." They bought bread, cheese, apples that were more expensive than the grocery store but tasted better. They walked home together through the snow. And for the first time since coming to Maple Ridge, Ethan felt like maybe he'd made the right choice. Cameron started drawing pictures. He'd always drawn at Sarah's house, at Ethan's brother's place, on the floor of the library with borrowed crayons. But these were different, more deliberate, more specific. In the first picture, there was a house with a blue door, a snowman in the yard, a man and a small boy standing on the porch. "That's us," Cameron explained, holding it up. "That's our house. I see that. It's good, but it needs more people." The next day's drawing had 3 figures, the man and the boy and a woman standing beside them, all 3 in front of the house with the blue door. Ethan found the picture on the kitchen table that night after Cameron had gone to bed. He sat there with a beer he wasn't really drinking, studying the crayon lines. The woman had dark hair, a green scarf. He folded the paper and put it in the drawer. But Cameron kept drawing. In one picture, all three of them were building a snowman. In another, they sat at a table eating something red, maybe spaghetti, maybe lasagna. In another, they stood by a frozen lake, holding hands in a chain. "Who's that?" Ethan asked, pointing to the woman, even though he knew. "Lena," Cameron said simply. "She's nice. She was nice. That was the problem. Lena came over on Tuesday with soup. On Thursday with a book for Cameron, something about trains. On Saturday, she invited them to help her shovel her driveway because her snowblower had broken. "I can fix that," Ethan said, looking at the ancient machine. "You don't have to." "I know." He did anyway. Spent an hour with frozen fingers and a borrowed socket set until the engine coughed to life. Cameron and Lena built a snow fort while he worked. Their laughter carried across the yard, high and bright and uncomplicated. When Ethan finished, he found them inside having hot chocolate. Lena had put marshmallows in Cameron's cup. Cameron had marshmallow foam on his upper lip and was telling a long, winding story about a dream he'd had involving dinosaurs and rocket ships. Lena listened like it was the most important story she'd ever heard. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked in the cold. The radiator clanked. Outside, wind pushed snow against the windows. He thought about Sarah, about how she used to look at him like he was a problem she was trying to solve. How every conversation near the end had been about what he wasn't doing, what he needed to change, what was wrong with the way he thought, or spoke, or existed. Lena didn't look at him like that. Lena looked at him like he was just a person who could fix snowblowers and shovel driveways and drink coffee and exist without needing to be anything other than what he was. It terrified him, because Sarah had left him. And if someone who'd promised to love him forever could leave, what would stop someone who'd only known him for 3 weeks? The next morning, Cameron showed him another picture. This one had all three of them again, but this time they were inside the house. You could see through the walls Cameron's X-ray vision version of home. The woman was in the kitchen. The man was sitting on the couch. The boy was on the floor with toys scattered around him. "It's us being a family," Cameron said. Ethan looked at his son's hopeful face and felt something crack inside his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see that." Cameron smiled and ran off to play. Ethan sat there with the picture in his hands, knowing he was going to ruin this. Somehow. Eventually, he always did. It started with Doug at the hardware store. "Saw you at Lena's place yesterday," he said, ringing up Ethan's purchase of wood screws and sandpaper. He said it casual, but there was weight behind it. Attention, fixing her snowblower. Right. Doug bagged the items slowly. Ethan took the bag, said nothing. Ruth mentioned it at the diner. "You and Lena are getting close, huh? Cameron just loves her." Pete, who ran the farmer's market, made a joke about it. Something about neighbors being friendly. Emphasis on the word in a way that made Ethan's jaw tighten. The town was small. Everyone saw everything, and everyone had an opinion about what they saw. Ethan started pulling back, not all at once, not dramatically, just small adjustments. When Lena brought coffee, he thanked her but didn't invite her in. When she asked if they wanted to come over for dinner, he said Cameron wasn't feeling well. When she offered to watch Cameron while Ethan went to a job interview at the regional hospital, he said his brother could do it instead. Lena noticed. Of course she noticed. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked one morning, standing on his porch with 2 cups of coffee that were going cold in the January air. "Because you can tell me if I'm overstepping." "You're not." "Then what is it?" Ethan looked at her. Really looked. She wore a blue coat and her hair was down and she looked tired. Like she'd been up thinking about this. About him. "I just need to be careful," he said. "Careful of what?" "Of getting comfortable." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then nodded. "Okay," She left the coffee and walked back across the street. Ethan watched her go and hated himself. The nights got longer. The wind picked up. The temperature dropped into single digits and stayed there. Ethan lay awake, listening to the furnace work overtime, to the windows rattle, to the silence that filled the spaces between sounds. Cameron asked about Lena. Why doesn't she come over anymore? She's busy. Can we go visit her? Not right now. Why not? Because I said so. Cameron's face crumpled, and Ethan immediately regretted the sharpness in his voice. He pulled his son close. Sorry. I'm sorry. We'll see her soon. Okay? But they didn't. Ethan found reasons to avoid her. Took different routes on their walks, shopped at different times. When he saw her car pull into her driveway, he stayed inside until she'd gone in. The light in her kitchen still came on every night. He still looked at it, but now it felt like looking at something through glass, close but untouchable. On Friday, 2 weeks after he'd started pulling away, Cameron left another drawing on the kitchen table. This one was just the man and the boy. The house still had the blue door, but there were only 2 figures standing in front of it. Ethan stared at the picture for a long time. That night, after Cameron was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and his phone. He opened and closed the same email from the hospital about the job interview results 3 times without reading it. The house was too quiet. The heat cycled on and off. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, until the world beyond the window became a white blur. He thought about Sarah's last words to him before he deployed the second time. I can't keep waiting for you to figure out how to be here. He thought about his commanding officer's words after a patrol went wrong. Walker, you scan for threats that aren't there. You need to learn the difference between caution and paralysis. He thought about Lena's voice. You don't have to do this alone. But alone was safe. Alone was predictable. Alone meant no one else got hurt when he inevitably failed. Ethan finished the water, put the glass in the sink, went to bed. Across the street, Lena's kitchen light stayed on until almost midnight. He knew because he watched it, lying in the dark, until it finally went out. The text came on Wednesday. Lena, I'm going to my friend's cabin this weekend, north of here. Quiet, lots of snow. I was going to go alone, but I thought I'd ask if you and Cameron wanted to come. No pressure, just thought you might need a change of scenery. Ethan stared at the message for 10 minutes. His first instinct was to say no, to make an excuse, to keep the distance he'd so carefully constructed. His second instinct was to ask Cameron what he thought. His son's face lit up. Can we? Please? Ethan typed. What time? The cabin was 40 minutes north, deeper into the woods where the snow sat heavier on the branches and the silence felt older. Lena drove. Ethan sat in the passenger seat watching the landscape change, houses giving way to trees. Trees giving way to white expanses broken only by the occasional frozen creek. Cameron sat in the back, nose pressed to the window, cataloging everything he saw. That's a big bird. That's a hawk, Lena said. What's it looking for? Mice, rabbits, things moving under the snow. Can it see them? Sometimes. The cabin belonged to Lena's college roommate who'd moved to Boston but kept the place for summer vacations. It was small, 1 bedroom, a loft, a kitchen that opened into a living room with a stone fireplace. The lake stretched out behind it, frozen solid and covered in a thin layer of fresh snow. It's perfect, Cameron announced. They spent the afternoon doing nothing important. Cameron played in the snow. Ethan split firewood. Lena made sandwiches and found board games in the closet. By evening, the fire was going and the cabin was warm, and the 3 of them sat around the table playing a game whose rules Cameron kept changing. That's not how it works, Ethan said. It's how it works now, Cameron insisted. Lena laughed. He's got a point. After Cameron went to bed in the loft already asleep before his head hit the pillow, Ethan and Lena sat by the fire. The windows had frosted over. The only sounds were the crackling logs and the occasional crack of ice on the lake adjusting to the cold. "Thank you for coming," Lena said. "Thank you for inviting us. You've been avoiding me." Ethan looked at the fire. "Yeah, can I ask why?" He didn't answer right away. He'd prepared several responses in the car. Things about needing space, about focusing on Cameron, about not being ready. But sitting here, with the fire warm and the night quiet and Lena just waiting without pushing, the prepared answers felt hollow. "I'm afraid," he said finally. "Of what?" "Of screwing this up." Lena was quiet for a moment. "This being? Whatever this is. You. Cameron getting attached, me getting attached." He rubbed his face. "I'm not good at this. Relationships. Being present. I deployed twice and came back and my marriage was over and I didn't even see it coming. Or maybe I did and I just didn't know how to stop it. You think the same thing will happen here? I think I'm the common denominator in my own failures." Lena pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" "Not really." She smiled slightly. "I see someone who shows up. Who fixes snowblowers and paints his kid's room and learns how to thaw frozen pipes. Who moved to a town where he doesn't know anyone because he thought it might be good for his son. That's not failure, Ethan. That's the opposite. Then why did my wife leave? I don't know. I never met her." Lena looked at him directly. "But I know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who makes you feel like you're never enough. Who watches you like you're a problem they need to solve." Ethan went still. "Your ex?" "Marcus. We were together for 4 years. Engaged for 6 months." She paused. He was very focused on control. On things being a certain way. His way. And when I started pushing back, started wanting my own life, my own choices, he started getting mean. Did he? No, not physically. But there are other ways to hurt someone. She looked at the fire. I left, moved here, started over, and for 2 years, he'd drive up every few months and sit in my driveway until I came out. Never said much, just wanted me to see him. To know he was still there. Jesus, it stopped about a year ago. I finally told him 3 numbers. 3 numbers? 9. 1. 1. She looked at Ethan. The next time he showed up, I called. He left before the police arrived. Haven't seen him since. They sat in silence. The fire popped. "I'm not him," Ethan said quietly. "I know. And I'm not your ex-wife," Lena added. "I'm not waiting for you to fail. I'm not keeping score. I'm just here. That's what scares me. That you're here, and I'll do something to make you leave. Or, Lena said, you'll do nothing, and I'll stay. And we'll figure it out together. Badly, probably. Messily, definitely. But together." Ethan looked at her. At the way the firelight caught in her eyes. At the scar on her chin he'd noticed, but never asked about. At the hands that had brought him coffee and fixed his son's sandwiches and existed in his life without asking for anything in return. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Neither do I," Lena replied. "But I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking if you'll try." Outside, the lake creaked under its weight of ice. Inside, the fire burned warm. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'll try." They returned from the cabin on Sunday evening. Cameron fell asleep in the car on the way back, and Ethan carried him inside while Lena gathered the bags. They moved around each other, easily practiced, despite only having spent 2 days together. "Coffee tomorrow?" Lena asked at the door. "Yeah." 7? 7. The next weeks felt like learning a language Ethan had forgotten, or maybe had never spoken fluently in the first place. Lena came over for coffee. Ethan went to her place for dinner. They alternated. They established patterns. Cameron ping-ponged between the 2 houses like it was the most natural thing in the world. They cooked together. Ethan made chili. Lena made stir-fry. Cameron appointed himself the taste tester and took the job very seriously. They argued about small things, whether to watch the news or a cooking show, whether the thermostat should be set at 68 or 70, whether Cameron should have dessert before finishing his vegetables. "He's 5, Lena said. "Exactly. He needs to learn. He needs to be 5. "You're undermining me. I'm offering a different perspective." They stared at each other across the kitchen table. Cameron watched them both, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Then Lena laughed. "This is so stupid." Ethan felt his jaw unclench. "Yeah, he can have dessert, after vegetables, half the vegetables. Deal." Cameron cheered. These were the fights Ethan had never learned to have with Sarah, the small disagreements that stayed small, that ended with compromise instead of silence. Some nights, Lena stayed late. They'd sit on the couch after Cameron went to bed, talking about nothing important. The news, the weather, stories from their day. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat there, each reading their own book. Shoulders touching. Ethan learned things. That Lena drank tea in the afternoon, but never at night. That she ran the numbers for 3 local businesses, but wanted to open her own bookstore someday. That she sang off-key in the car and didn't care. That she'd grown up in Vermont and missed the mountains but didn't miss the cold. "Why did you move to Maple Ridge?" Ethan asked one night. "It was far enough away," she said. "From Marcus. From everything I was running from. And now? Now it's just home." Ethan reached over and took her hand. She laced her fingers through his. The learning went both ways. Lena learned that Ethan woke at 5 every morning and couldn't break the habit. That he checked locks twice before bed. That loud noises still made him flinch. That he had nightmares sometimes and didn't like to talk about them after. She learned not to ask questions he couldn't answer. Learned to wait. Learned the difference between patience and pressure. Cameron started calling her each morning. Not on the phone, just opening the front door and yelling across the street, "Lena, good morning." And she'd open her door and yell back, "Good morning, Cameron." It became a ritual. 7 a.m. every day. One Tuesday, Ethan realized he hadn't thought about leaving in over a week, hadn't scanned for exits, hadn't planned his escape route. "You okay?" Lena asked. They were doing dishes. She was washing. He was drying. "Yeah," he said, and meant it. That night, Cameron drew another picture. The house with the blue door, the 3 figures. But this time, they weren't just standing in front of the house, they were inside it, in the kitchen, doing dishes, being normal, being a family. Ethan put the picture on the refrigerator where everyone could see it. The black sedan appeared on a Thursday. Ethan noticed it first, old habits dying hard. It was parked across from Lena's house, not directly in front. 2 houses down, close enough to see but far enough to seem coincidental. A man sat in the driver's seat. Ethan couldn't see his face clearly, but he could see the posture, the stillness, the watching. He felt the familiar tightness return to his chest. "What are you looking at?" Cameron asked. He was eating cereal at the kitchen table. "Nothing. Finish your breakfast." The sedan stayed for 2 hours. Then it left. Ethan didn't mention it to Lena that night. Told himself he was probably being paranoid, probably projecting, probably seeing threats that weren't there. The sedan came back on Saturday. This time, Lena saw it too. Ethan was at her house helping install new locks on her back door, a project she'd been putting off when she glanced out the window and went still. "He's back," she said quietly, but he already knew. "Marcus." Ethan set down the screwdriver. "How long has he been doing this? This week? This is the 3rd time." Lena's hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat against the counter. "Before that, I hadn't seen him in over a year." I thought she stopped. I thought it was over. "Want me to talk to him?" "Lena." "No." She looked at him. I need to handle this myself. That's the whole point. I can't have someone else fight my battles. Ethan understood, but understanding didn't make it easier to watch her walk outside alone. He stood at the window, Cameron beside him coloring at the table, unaware. Watched Lena cross the street, watched her approach the sedan, watched the driver's window roll down. They talked. Ethan couldn't hear the words, could only read the body language. Marcus leaning out slightly, Lena standing back, arms crossed, defensive, firm. It lasted maybe 3 minutes. Then Lena turned and walked back. The sedan stayed. When she came inside, her face was composed but pale. He says he just wants to talk. To apologize properly. He says he's been in therapy. And you believe him? I don't know what I believe. The sedan left an hour later. Ethan finished the locks. Cameron asked why Lena seemed sad, and Ethan told him she was just tired. That night, Ethan sat at his kitchen window long after Cameron was asleep. The street was dark except for the occasional porch light. Snow had started falling again, light flurries that caught in the streetlights. He thought about walking across the street, about making sure Lena was okay, about standing guard, but that wasn't what she needed. She'd made that clear. The sedan returned on Monday, and Tuesday, and Wednesday. Each time, Marcus stayed longer. Each time, Lena's face got tighter, more controlled. By Friday, she wasn't sleeping. Ethan could see it in the shadows under her eyes, in the way her hands couldn't stay still. "Call the police," Ethan said. "And tell them what? He's parked on a public street. He hasn't threatened me. He's just there. That's harassment. Not legally. Not yet." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to fix this, wanted to physically remove the threat from their street. Every instinct he'd honed over 2 deployments screamed at him to act, but Lena had asked him not to, so he stayed on his side of the street. Stayed at his window. Watched. On Sunday, the sedan returned, but this time, Marcus got out. He walked toward Lena's house slowly, like he had all the time in the world, like he belonged there. Ethan was moving before he thought about it. Out the door, across the lawn, through the snow. He stopped in the middle of the street. Marcus looked at him. Mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing an expensive coat, not physically imposing but carrying himself like someone used to being listened to. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked. "This is a private street," Ethan said. Not true, but it sounded good. "I'm just visiting a friend. She doesn't want visitors." Marcus smiled slightly. "Let her tell me that." The front door opened. Lena stepped out onto her porch. "Ethan, it's okay." "Is it?" She looked at Marcus. Then at Ethan. Then back to Marcus. "You need to leave. You need to stop coming here. You need to stop sitting in your car watching my house like I'm something you own." "I just want to talk," Marcus said. Same tone, same control. 5 minutes. "Lena, 911. She said it clearly, deliberately. Marcus's composure slipped for just a second. Then he adjusted his coat. "I've been trying to apologize. I don't accept your apology. I don't want to see you. I don't want you in my life. Leave." Ethan stood there in the middle of the street, every muscle ready. But he didn't move toward Marcus, didn't step between them, didn't shield or save or intercept. He just stood there. Present. Witness. Marcus looked at them both. Then he walked back to his sedan, got in, started the engine. The car pulled away slowly, deliberately, making sure they both knew he was choosing to leave. Ethan walked to Lena's porch. She was shaking. "You didn't need to come out. I know. I had it handled. I know." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her. They stood there while the snow fell and the street returned to quiet. "Think he'll come back?" Ethan asked. "I don't know." She pulled back to look at him. "But if he does, I'll handle it the same way. and I'll stand in the street and watch. Deal. The letter came on a Monday. Ethan saw the return address and felt his stomach drop. Albany Medical Center. Department of Veteran Affairs. He'd applied almost 2 months ago, before Cameron's birthday, before things with Lena had solidified into something real. He opened it standing at the kitchen counter while Cameron watched cartoons in the living room. We are pleased to offer you the position of Rehabilitation Coordinator. Starting salary, $72,000. Benefits, retirement, relocation assistance. It was more than double what he'd been offered at the regional hospital, more than he'd made in the Army, more than he'd ever thought he'd see outside of a deployment bonus. He read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it and put it in the junk drawer. That night, after Cameron was asleep, he told Lena. They were at his place, sitting on the couch with mugs of tea that had gone cold. Outside, snow fell, in that particular way that makes the world feel muffled and distant. That's amazing, Lena said, but her voice was careful, measured. It's in Albany. I know where Albany is. 3 hours away. I can do math, Ethan. They sat in silence. The TV was on mute, casting flickering light across the room. What are you going to do? Lena asked finally. I don't know. Do you want to take it? I want Cameron to be stable. I want him to have a good school and a good life and not have to worry about money. That's not what I asked. Ethan looked at her. No, I don't want to take it. Then don't. It's not that simple. Why not? Because it's the smart choice, the responsible choice, the choice that makes sure my son has what he needs. Cameron needs his father, Lena said quietly. Not a bank account. He needs both. So, you're going to leave. I didn't say that. You're thinking it. Ethan set down his mug. What do you want me to say, Lena? That I'll turn down a job that could change our lives because I want to stay here, because of you? She flinched. Just slightly. None of this is fair. This is real life. This is bills and responsibilities and making sure my kid has health insurance. And what about us? There is no us if I can't provide for my son. The words came out harsher than he intended. Lena stood up, wrapped her arms around herself. You're right. There is no us. There's just you making decisions about what you think is best without actually asking what I think. You think I should turn it down. I think you should make the choice that's right for you. Not for me. Not even for Cameron. For you. She looked at him. What do you want, Ethan? He wanted to stay. He wanted to keep coming home to this house. Wanted Cameron to keep yelling good morning across the street. Wanted to keep learning how to argue about thermostats and cook dinner badly and exist in the same space as someone who didn't need him to be anything other than what he was. But wanting wasn't enough. Wanting didn't pay rent or put food on the table or cover medical bills when Cameron inevitably fell off something and needed stitches. I want to be a good father, he said finally. You already are. Then I want to be a better one. Lena picked up her coat from the chair. I'm going home. Not because I'm angry, just because you need to figure this out without me in the room. Lena, don't choose me, Ethan. Don't stay here for me. Choose what's right. Whatever that is. She left. Ethan sat on the couch for a long time. The letter was still in the junk drawer. The TV still flickered silently. Outside, the snow kept falling. At some point, he got up and went to the kitchen. Pulled out the letter. Read it again. Starting date. March 15th. 6 weeks away. He looked across the street at Lena's house. The kitchen light was on. He could see her shadow moving past the window. He could go. Take Cameron. Start over in Albany. Build a stable life. Do the smart thing. Or he could stay. Risk it. See what happened when he stopped running from the possibility of failure. Ethan folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. Then he opened his laptop and started composing an email to the regional hospital, asking if their offer was still open. The regional hospital said yes. Not the salary he would have gotten in Albany. Not the title or the benefits package or the relocation assistance. But enough. Just enough. Ethan started the following Monday. The rehabilitation unit was small, 6 beds, 2 physical therapists, 1 occupational therapist, and now Ethan as coordinator. His job was logistics, scheduling, equipment maintenance, insurance, paperwork. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't impressive. But it was steady, and he could be home by 4:30 every day. The routine solidified quickly. Wake at 5. Run. Shower. Wake Cameron at 6:30. Breakfast. Drop Cameron at school. Work. Pick up Cameron at 3. Homework. Dinner. And somewhere in that routine, Lena fit seamlessly. She kept her own space, kept her own house. But her presence became constant without being overwhelming. She had coffee with them in the mornings, ate dinner at Ethan's place 3 nights a week. Cameron stayed at her house when Ethan had to work late. It wasn't cohabitation. It was something more organic. 2 lives overlapping without merging. "Are you going to marry Lena?" Cameron asked one night. They were in the bathroom. Ethan was supervising teeth brushing, which Cameron treated as a loose suggestion rather than a directive. "Why do you ask?" "Because then she could live here all the time. She has her own house, but she could have 2 houses. That's not really how it works." Cameron spit. Rinsed. "Do you love her?" Ethan handed him a towel. "Yeah, I do. Does she love you?" "I think so." "Then you should marry her." "It's more complicated than that, Bud." Because Ethan was terrified. Because marriage meant promises he'd already broken once. Because loving someone and being able to keep them were different things. But Cameron was 5. February brought a cold snap. The kind where car batteries died and water lines froze, and everyone walked hunched against the wind. School was canceled twice. The diner ran out of coffee. The hardware store ran out of salt for the walkways. Ethan and Lena took Cameron sledding at the hill behind the elementary school. Cameron went down 17 times, counting each run with increasing excitement. He finally agreed to leave only when his fingers were too cold to hold the rope. They warmed up at Lena's house with hot chocolate and a fire. Cameron fell asleep on the couch wrapped in a blanket, his cheeks still pink from the cold. "He looks like you," Lena said quietly. "No, he looks like his mom. He has your stubborn streak. That's not genetic. That's environmental." She smiled, reached over and took his hand. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too. Even without the fancy Albany salary. Even without." They sat there while the fire crackled and Cameron snored softly and the wind rattled the windows. Outside, the world was frozen and harsh. Inside, it was warm. "I love you," Ethan said. Not planned, not rehearsed. Just true. Lena looked at him. "Say it again. I love you. One more time. I love you." She kissed him. Soft and slow and certain. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I love you too." In case that wasn't clear, it was pretty clear. Good. That night, Ethan carried a sleeping Cameron home through the snow. Lena walked with them, her hand in his free one. At his front door, she kissed him good night and walked back across the street to her own house. Ethan watched her go. Watched her light come on in the kitchen. Watched her shadow move past the window. He put Cameron to bed, checked the locks, turned off the lights, and for the first time in years, he went to sleep without scanning for threats or planning escape routes or waiting for everything to fall apart. Ethan bought the ring in March. It wasn't fancy. He couldn't afford fancy. But it was old estate sale, early 1900s, gold band with a small diamond surrounded by tiny garnets. The jeweler in town cleaned it up and sized it and put it in a simple box. Ethan kept it in his sock drawer for 3 weeks, taking it out every few days to make sure it was still there. Still real. He had no plan. No grand gesture. No restaurant reservation or elaborate scheme, because that wasn't them. On a Thursday in late March, with snow still on the ground but the promise of spring in the air, Ethan made dinner. Nothing special. Pasta with marinara from a jar, garlic bread, salad from a bag. Cameron set the table. Lena brought wine. They ate like they'd done 100 times before. After dinner, Cameron drew at the table while Ethan and Lena cleaned up. The radio played quietly. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the sun was setting earlier each day, but still setting too soon. "Cameron," Ethan said, "I need to talk to Lena for a minute. Can you go play in your room?" Cameron looked up. "Why?" "Because I'm asking, but I want to stay." "Cameron, fine." He gathered his crayons with dramatic sighs and trudged off. Lena dried her hands on a towel. "What's up?" Ethan's heart was pounding. This was stupid. This was too soon. They'd only been together for what? 4 months? 5? But then he thought about every morning coffee, every dinner, every argument about thermostats, every night sitting on the couch reading separate books with shoulders touching. Every moment Cameron yelled good morning across the street and she yelled back. He thought about Albany, about choosing to stay, about learning to stop scanning for exits. He pulled the box from his pocket. Lena went very still. "I don't have a speech," Ethan said. "I'm not good at speeches. But I know that you made this town feel like home. You made me feel like I could stop running. And I want to keep feeling that. Every day. For as long as you'll let me." He opened the box. Lena's hand went to her mouth. "Will you marry me?" She nodded, then laughed. Then said, "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. She kissed him hard, and he kissed her back. And somewhere in the house, Cameron yelled, "Can I come out now?" "Yes," Lena shouted back. Cameron ran into the kitchen. Saw them standing together. Saw the ring. "Did you ask her?" I asked her. "And she said yes?" She said yes. Cameron pumped his fist and ran in circles around the kitchen table. "I'm getting a second house! I'm getting a second house!" "That's still not how it works," Ethan said, but he was laughing. They told people slowly. Ruth at the diner, Doug at the hardware store, Pete at the farmer's market. News traveled fast in small towns. By the end of the week, everyone knew. The wedding was small. Backyard at Lena's house. First Saturday in April when the snow had finally melted, but the trees hadn't quite bloomed yet. Folding chairs, string lights, someone's cousin playing guitar. Cameron was the ring bearer and took the job incredibly seriously, walking down the makeshift aisle with exaggerated slow steps. Ruth made a cake. Doug brought beer. Pete brought flowers from his greenhouse. Ethan wore his only suit. Lena wore a simple white dress and held wildflowers. They said their vows standing on the back porch while the sun set and the birds sang, and 30 people they'd known for less than a year watched and cheered. "I promised to stay," Ethan said, "to keep showing up, to stop looking for exits. I promised to let you," Lena replied, "to trust you, to build something together that's ours." They kissed. Cameron cheered the loudest. That night, after everyone had left and the lights were taken down and Cameron was asleep in his new room, they'd decided to live in Lena's house, which was bigger. Ethan stood in the backyard, looking at his old house across the street. Lena came out and stood beside him. "You okay?" "Yeah." He put his arm around her. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how home isn't where you escape to. It's where you decide to stay." "That's very poetic. I have my moments. Rarely. Don't ruin this." She laughed and kissed him. And they stood there together while the stars came out and the world turned cold again, and inside the house they'd built together, their son slept safe and warm. The end.